Fantastic. We are so
Hello.
grateful that at this point there are 20 sane people in the world who decided to be here instead of watching the Oscars.
We are Are the Oscars today?
Yeah, the Oscars are, I think,
Oh,
right
wow.
hot now.
I did not
I
write
think,
hot now.
yeah. I just made
did
it up
not
on the
know
spot.
that. For some reason, I thought they were some time ago, and then I saw an article this morning about the Oscars being, what was being nominated, and I thought, why are we still talking about
I
that?
think it's tonight. Anybody in chat know?
I think you must be
Are they
right.
actually going on tonight?
think
The
you-
Oscars going on
I
tonight?
think you must be right.
Can somebody tell me one movie that's nominated for Best Picture? I mean, that's such a statement of my life in this season. Like I don't know a single one.
I didn't read the article, or I would be able to tell you.
But through most of my life, I would have known at least a movie or two. Have we seen a movie
I saw
since the last?
Migration recently.
I wonder if
It's a cartoon.
I wonder if that's included in the Academy Award nominees for this evening.
It was super cute. But I think it was released this year, so probably.
Oh, and I saw. Yeah, I can't remember. I'm sure I saw something. Okay, so
we haven't
have.
been to a movie, and I don't even know how long.
We haven't had a date, and I don't know how long. Oh
That's
well,
true.
that's a good thing we're close.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time together.
We really do. All right, so we do have an icebreaker question tonight. This is super important, very serious business. What is the most awkward situation, embarrassing moment that you have endured in your lifetime? It's a good one. I've got a good story. I shared this with her for the first time like 5 minutes ago, and she's like, I don't have one.
I don't know. I was hoping that the Lord would provide me something while you're talking about yours, because I don't know. I'm sure I've had many. Well, actually, yes.
Oh, here it comes.
I mean, it's
You want to give it?
No, you go first.
No. Especially if you don't think yours is that embarrassing.
It's
You should
not
go
that
first.
good.
'Cause mine's
it was
embarrassing.
an awkward moment. I was just talking to my daughter about how I don't know what I would say, and she was like, "I went to the bathroom into a men's bathroom at Costco," and I'm not mentioning which daughter it is because I didn't ask her if I could share that. But that reminded me that, guys, I'm not crying. Apparently, I have a problem with my tear ducts being covered over, so I just look like I'm crying all the time. Anyway, it reminded me that I did that at a theme park, just walked right in, and I think I had a kid with me and was going about my business, and then there was like a guy who was looking at me weird, and I was like, why is he looking at me so weird? And then I realized that's a guy in the bathroom, and I'm the one that's in the wrong bathroom. But I mean, not that, exciting of a story. But it was awkward.
That's worthy. It's worthy.
It's embarrassing.
All right, so here's mine. This is embarrassing. So we've shared before that Cassie and I work in production, and there was a famous old sermon by just a very fiery preacher. There's like an old recording of it, and it's something like, that's my king. And it goes on and on. It's very inspiring. It's very beautiful. And when this recording was unearthed, a number of people who work in churches created videos for it. And I was at this professional. I was at a business, and this was a place that made media for churches. I mean, like they were like a top of the line outfit. And I'd seen a video that a church had made with this recording a week ago, and it was so good. And this guy says, oh, I got to show you this video on this sermon. And he pulled it up, and I was looking forward to it because I loved it and I thought it was so cool. And he showed me this one, and it was not the one I'd seen, and it really wasn't very good. And I was like, oh man, I saw one last week that blew that one out of the water. And he was like, yeah, I made that one. It's like, oh no. That was my embarrassing moment.
That was awkward.
Yeah, it could have been worse. All right, so let's go. Beb2423 was running at the gym.
Oh, that's...
And hucked her phone by getting clotheslined.
Did you hit someone with it? I hope not.
That's awesome. All right, so 90 Hammond, I was speaking at an event in a room with mirrored walls. Are you sure this wasn't some bizarre fever dream? So I was going to her room, I saw my reflection and stopped to clean that thing out of my teeth. Oh, and she realized the mirrors were just windows on the inside and people were watching you pick your teeth.
Oh, no.
That's fantastic.
Wait, go up a little bit. Go up a little bit. Oh, no. Okay.
No, that's all of them?
That was it. All right.
Oh, Oppenheimer is nominated for Best Picture. Haven't seen that one either, but I've heard of that one. All right, so Jell-O wrestled for a radio promotion in the 80s.
Well, I don't
even understand what that means.
Please
but
do tell more.
But it could be
Jell-O
wildly inappropriate.
Well, that's true. I guess only tell the PG version.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Well, we can go ahead and get started.
Yes.
I mean, I know it's a cliffhanger while we wait for old Anthony to give the details. Yes, Killers of the Flower Moon. I've heard of that. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started.
Oh, bummer. Look, Tom went to a Young Life club and nobody came.
Oh,
not even the kid that lived
there. Well, you know, sometimes when I've been live streaming, I've felt that way. Like, it's like, did I push the live stream button? Because nobody is anyway. Let's begin.
We'll get started. We have a great night in store. I'm Cassie, and this is Shane, and it's so good to be back with you again. We really enjoy interacting with you guys in chat, and it's also been super fun to watch our community grow on socials. As even though we're just babies on socials, so help us out if you guys want to join. Click the links below. We'd love for you to go ahead and do that right now while you're watching. We won't even know you're multitasking.
Go.
It's just really important to us to build a community here on Encounter Online, and you are invited. We want you to come along with us. In particular, if you're ready to take the next step into our community, I invite you to join us in Discord. Discord, for those of you that don't know, is a conversation platform where we can just gather on a daily basis and share life together. If you're not familiar with Discord, don't worry. I am not familiar with Discord. There are people there ready to help you.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. So I'm super excited here. I've spent a good long while since we started Encounter Online. One of the first things that we did is we started doing some gaming. I met this amazing young lady who went to the same school that I did. Not like back in the day. Okay, so I'm old, she's young, but we went to the same school. Older
than she is.
Could be her dad. Sure. But anyway, oddly enough, we have her dad here tonight.
Yay!
If you remember Brenna, she led our prayer time last week. Last night, I was gaming with her and rolling dice and Sundered Lands. And today, for an encounter story, we have her dad, Derek. Super excited to have you here. What's going on, Derek? How are you?
Phenomenal. How are you guys? It's good to have an opportunity to talk about an encounter with the Lord. That's awesome.
Oh, right on. I don't know. I've known you for approximately an hour and a half or something like that,
2 hours.
Tops. And one thing that I've learned is that you're fired up.
That's well said. Yes, sir, I am.
Right.
Yes, sir, I am. So you might want to adjust that volume accordingly, folks, because I'm about to get going.
Fantastic. Well, just to remind you, if you guys haven't been with us, if you're new to Encounter Online, one of the things that we say a lot, because we've all experienced it, it's true, is that one encounter with Jesus can change everything. And so we share stories of people who've actually had encounters with Jesus. And we're not talking about old stuff in the Bible. That is certainly valuable. We're going to talk more about that later. But what about people who encounter Jesus today? And Derek has an amazing series of encounter stories. He's just going to share his whole life of encounter, I suppose. I'm just going to turn it over to you. So take it away, man.
All right. Well, I'm telling you guys, if I can do this, I'm about to give you a leg up because I am an amputee.
I didn't know that.
That's where we're going on this. So my first encounter with the Lord, it was interesting. It occurred when I was about 7 years old. And I'll tell you what led me to that. My dad was my hero. He was a Vietnam veteran. He flew Hueys in Vietnam. Huey helicopters, got shot down, but he was a hard man. He was very hard. And in my younger years, he was very hard on me. And when I was about 6 or 7, I watched and I saw him have an encounter with the Lord, a real, genuine encounter. And I saw him change specifically in the way he treated me. And he came to me and he said, now keep in mind, I'm 6 years old, not quite 7. And he said to me, he said, son, I've been way too hard on you. And he said, I have encountered the Lord and it's changed my life. So I sat back and I watched. And after that conversation for several months, I watched how he treated me, how he treated my mother, how he treated my sister, and I saw dramatic change. So as a result of that, I chose to ask God, hey, God, if you're real, I want an encounter too, like my dad did. And as a result, I had an encounter at 7 years old. Now, throughout my life, there's times when you feel closer to God, and there's times when you feel farther away. It just is. It is. And it's natural. But here's my challenge to you. If you ask God for an encounter, he will absolutely give you one. But it will be probably in a way that you never expected it to be. The second time I can remember encounter, I was 15 years old. I'm overseas. We spent a year overseas, my family did. I'm on a Greek island in the middle of nowhere, and I look up and I see the heavens just full of the stars. Every one of them just so full of the stars. And that was the second time where I really felt an encounter with God. And the fact that I felt so small and he was so big, obviously, yet he had an interest in me. And so moving forward, I've had a career in law enforcement, had a career working with the military. I fought extensively in Iraq, extensively in Afghanistan, multiple times over there. I was shot and blown up and just protected when I should be dead. I should be dead. And yet God spared my life. So I'll go into one of those stories. One night in particular, we looked up and we used NVGs, night vision goggles is what they are. And they allowed us a major advantage when fighting at night. But we didn't like the full moon because the full moon kind of was the equalizer. And I remember looking up one night and seeing that full moon. And again, I had another encounter because I was like, I hate that full moon. I hate what's going on. I was just thinking about the negativity. And then I felt like the impression is what I will say, that the moon has no light of its own. None. It's a reflection of the sun. And I felt like the impression that God was saying, that's how I want you to reflect me. Like the moon reflects the sun. So I said, wow, I want to do that, Lord. And I asked for that in my life. And so as a result, when I was shot, my first time I was shot was through and through in the arm. I didn't realize I was shot. I kept fighting until later, but God definitely spared my life. The guy behind me was shot 3 times. I was only shot once. 3 months later, there was something in a house. I was leading a unit. We attacked a compound. Something was just off. I just felt like it was off. We came in through a different way, through a second level, rather than coming on ground level. And long story short, there was an IED on the first floor that blew up underneath us. And I was spared again. I was bruised, but spared again. 4 months later, after that, I was fighting again. Night after night, it was very intense fighting. And I felt the impression that I shouldn't say anything out loud, but I did. I called for my interpreter because I was working with the locals, and I was concerned about their safety. And I called for the interpreter 3 times. And on the 3rd time, the guy that we were looking for opened up with a PKM machine gun, and I took 3 rounds from a PKM. I ended up falling back. I saw my leg going in a way it shouldn't go. And I didn't even think that, about dying. I didn't even think that was a possibility. I returned fire, dealt with that threat. And then as I was being transported out of that area, I think I was bleeding out is the only thing that I can explain to you that happened. I know I was severely wounded, and I saw a bright white light. And I remember talking to Jesus. I didn't see him, but I was talking to him. And I said, I am so ready to be with you. I cannot wait to spend eternity with you. And let me tell you, it's so much easier when you settle the question of eternity, folks. It's so much easier because then death is no longer a threat. You don't fear it anymore. And it's a result of way back when, that first encounter, I had settled that question. And when I woke up a day later in the hospital in Bagram, in the military hospital, with tubes down my throat, I can honestly tell you, I was disappointed. Because I remember saying, Lord, I didn't think this is what we were doing. I thought we had other plans. But I will tell you, I see why that my life was spared. I see why every day I have an opportunity to reach people, folks, that I could never reach before. Now, God didn't do this to me. I ignored the impression. I didn't listen. I believe I was warned. And I put myself in that position. So he didn't do this to me. But he will use things for good if you invite him into the situation. And I'm just telling you, I have seen that again and again, because in case you don't know it and you can't see it, I'm a pretty hard charger. I'm a big guy. I've spent my whole life since I was 15 in the gym. And basically, I have never had the opportunities that I've had since losing my leg to reach a whole new group of people, because I'm approachable now, and I was never approachable before. And so while God didn't do this to me, it has opened up a tremendous opportunity. So what do? Every day I give people a leg up. That's my word.
There we go. Yeah, I'm still learning this. I don't know how to work any of this equipment. Anyway, so that is just crazy. Every time I have one of these encounter stories, we talk a bit offline before we bring it on here, and just that whole ending of the story. Like for me, I thought, no, it's wild. You have had in your life encounter after encounter, and then really the pinnacle of your story is a time when you were looking forward to encountering Jesus, but you didn't get to. And I was like, man, is that kind of anticlimactic to end with that? But no, man. And just the way that he's turned that into a gift, into a new chapter of adventure in your life. I'd love for you to unpack that just a little bit more. Like how what seemed like a missed encounter is actually like maybe your biggest opportunity.
Oh, it definitely is. I mean, I can tell you, I still work extensively overseas. I was working in a foreign country in the Middle East here a month ago. I get on an elevator and I look in there and all these folks are there. And I'm like, wow, you folks look miserable. And I just look at them, because think about it. In an elevator, people don't talk. They just stare at the floor, stare at the walls. So I just looked at myself, wow, you folks look miserable. I said, and one of these like, well, I worked all day. I said, well, I did too. But I said, you know what? I'm here to give you a leg up, ma'am. I'm putting my best foot forward. And I was wearing shorts. She could see, and she starts busting out laughing. I said, see, I got you right there.
Man, that is fantastic. So this whole community is something that we're trying to gather around the idea that that an encounter with Jesus is actually a possible thing. It's not accepting an intellectual idea or deciding, oh, I'm going to fall in with these people and believe this certain set of truths, or I know these certain doctrines and I'm going to accept them and order my life around them. But like, no, there is actually a supernatural experience available. As a guy who's had a lot of them, you've already given us one great insight, which is just invite it. Do you have any like last words, last encouragements for somebody who may be questioning, like, is this for real? Can this really happen? Or are you super wacko? I'm sure you've been accused of that.
I will just tell you, hey, careful what you ask for and what you invite, because you'll get it. There's a scripture that is one of my favorites. I say it over myself every day, and I love this version. It's Psalm 37, verse 5, and it says this: give God the right to direct your life, and as you trust him along the way, you'll find he pulled it off perfectly. And I can tell you that I've seen again and again and again and again and again. So I challenge you folks, you want an encounter? Ask for it. Ask for it, but expect it to come in a way that is far beyond and different than you could ever envision.
I mean, I wish this mic wasn't like mounted on the stand, because I feel like I just need to drop it and say good night, folks, because really what else is there left to say? Man, Derek, it's been great getting to know you a little bit. I'd love to have you back here sometime. So thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. I so appreciate it. Folks, I hope you have a good night.
Man, fantastic. All right, talk to you later. Oh my goodness. Man, what a cool dude, and what a cool story. And I'm so excited to see so many names of folks I know in the chat. I've got some dear old friends, not that they're old. I'm always the old one here. If I'm talking old, it's me. But I've got Zelandroid, who really represents two friends in Drunken Geekery, and some new friends with old Anthony and Hegelmark. But so I've got some story to share tonight. This week we're going to continue this conversation we started a couple of weeks ago. We're, like I said, we're striving to build a community of people who recognize that we're all on a spiritual journey, and that pursuing that journey as part of a family just makes it so much more meaningful and satisfying. And for those of us who've kind of started this experiment, that journey has been about Jesus. And he's really made all the difference for us. And that's why we want to be about helping folks encounter Jesus, his people, and his purposes for their lives. And we believe that just one encounter with Jesus can change everything. So to make sure that we're all on the same page, each of the next several weeks, we're going to look at an ancient encounter story from the pages of the Bible. And we're going to try to pull out just two key takeaways. I know that's an old book and a lot of people aren't super familiar with it, but we're going to keep it simple. First, what does this ancient encounter story tell us about how we can encounter Jesus today? And second, what fundamental truth can we discover about who Jesus is? So tonight we're going to look at a beautiful story. You know, some stories in the Bible are just difficult to understand, to connect to. They're different cultures, totally different references. Sometimes you have to do a lot of homework to understand the significance. That is totally not the case with tonight's story. I think absolutely anyone reading this story can be deeply moved by the profound human drama, can be captivated by the bold compassion of Jesus, can see how this story is significant without a lot of unpacking. So let's jump in. Like I said, this is a good one. We're going to look at chapter 7 of the book of Luke and pick it up in verse 36. Here we go. When one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. A woman in that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house, so she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. As she stood behind Jesus at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. And then she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he thought to himself, if this man was a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner. And Jesus answered him, Simon, I have something to tell you. Tell me, teacher, he said. 2 people owed money to a banker. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back, so he forgave the debts of both. Now, which of them will love him more? And Simon replied, I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven. You have judged correctly, Jesus said. And then he turned towards the woman, but said to Simon, do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman, from the time I entered, has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore, I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has shown. But whoever has been forgiven little loves little. And Jesus said to her, Woman, your sins are forgiven. And all the other guests began to say among themselves, Who is this who even forgives sins? But Jesus said to the woman, Your faith has saved you. Go in peace. All right. Like I said, wow, 2,000 years later, and we don't need a history lesson to get the point that Jesus is full of compassion and mercy even when religious people are quick to condemn. Jesus is quick to offer complete forgiveness. So honestly, yeah, really for the second time tonight, I could stop here, mic drop, but there are a few additional things that I would love to unpack, if you've got a minute, that I believe help make this story really significant today to us. I think there's a really powerful truth in here about how we can encounter Jesus today. So let's start talking about what is Jesus even doing at this dinner party in the first place? I mean, it's being thrown by a guy named Simon, who is a Pharisee, and the Pharisees were the religious authorities of the day. And it's totally hard for us to get how much influence these guys had over everyone's daily life back then. They ran the synagogues, they interpreted the scripture to tell everyone what God meant. And at this point in God's interaction with mankind, he had given people, his people, the Jews, all of these laws through Moses. I mean, like the 10 Commandments were really just the tip of the iceberg. And now laws from God are one thing, but then the Pharisees came along and created hundreds and hundreds more rules that only a full-time religious person could even keep up with, let alone obey. So it essentially secured their position as the perpetual leaders of all the people. And so here's what's significant. When Jesus shows up on the scene, he threatened that position. And here's how bad it was. In the book of Luke, which is what we're reading out of right now, Jesus doesn't show up as an adult in the story until chapter 4. And right there in chapter 4, the Pharisees try to throw Jesus off a cliff and kill him. And then in chapters 5 and 6, Jesus has 4 more run-ins with these religious bigwigs. And now in chapter 7, a group of Pharisees have invited him for dinner. No, this is not actually a friendly invite. And you can tell that by the way they've treated him. Yes, they've given him a place at the table with them, but they've insulted him before he even gets to the appetizer. In this day and age, almost everyone wore sandals and walked everywhere they went. The streets were all made of like dusty, packed dirt. And there was no giant, sweet streeper machine that would drive around at night and clean up all the animal manure. People's feet weren't just dirty, they were unsanitary. And so when you entered someone's house in this Middle Eastern hospitality-focused culture, there was always a basin of water and a towel at the door to wash your feet. If it was a wealthy person's house, there was a servant assigned to do the job. And if the person coming in was a guest of honor, the host himself would wash the guests' feet. But apparently, the Pharisees have withheld this common courtesy from Jesus. They've all got clean feet, and his are filthy. That could only be an intentional insult. And also in this culture, people would greet one another with a kiss. Even men would do that, double kiss thing. A lot of cultures still do that today. But clearly no one was kissing our man Jesus with the dirty feet here. Again, withholding a common courtesy, a sign of respect you would pay to anyone. And finally, when a special or honorable guest would come into a home, it was common for the host to take a little bottle of perfumed oil, pour just a drop on the guest's head. I mean, that's a more obscure cultural practice for us to understand today. But the point is that by not doing it, the Pharisees were basically saying, Jesus, you ain't special here. So again, why did Jesus even come? I mean, Jesus wasn't stupid. He knew this wasn't going to be a pleasant evening of polite conversation, and it might even end with all the dinner guests trying to run him off a cliff. And I think we see here a really important point for those of us who want to encounter Jesus today. Derek has already made this point for us. Here it is. If you issue an invitation to Jesus, he has a tendency to show up. I mean, throughout the scriptures, every single time somebody asked for Jesus to come, he did. And Jesus actually promises to do just that. In Revelation 4:20, he says, look, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I'll come in and dine with them. And so they invited Jesus, and here Jesus is. But I also think that there's a very real possibility that Jesus is at this event tonight to meet not with the Pharisees, but to meet with someone who's not on the guest list. So even with all these insults, they apparently did actually dine with the guy that they invited to dinner. Our story says that Jesus reclined at the table with them. The way they ate in this culture was that the tables were about 1.5 feet off the ground, and everyone would lie down on their left side, sort of propped up on decorative cushions, and they would eat with their right hand with their feet pointing out away from the table, which was great because Jesus had some skanky feet. And we don't know what conversation was happening or how long it's been going on, but suddenly there's another person in the room. Everyone's reclining at the table, but there's one person standing, and it's the worst person imaginable. The Bible says this was a woman who led a sinful life, a sinful woman. When you look historically at the original language, this phrase was actually a euphemism for prostitute. So one of the town prostitutes, apparently well known, has shown up in the dining room of the local synagogue leader at a dinner that includes all the religious elite of the town. I mean, this was a scandal that's never going to go away. And it's hard to imagine the shock and horror that would have been on these guys' faces. Actually, it's super fun to imagine where these guys were looking when the prostitute shows up to the religious dinner party. I mean, I'm sure a lot of them were looking at the woman, glaring, thinking, why would someone like that think they could come into a place like this? I'm sure that for some of them, this breach of decorum was just too much, and they were looking down. They were embarrassed for the woman or for Simon, like, awkward. But I'm also guessing that some of these church leaders were looking away, suddenly fascinated by what dish might be coming out of the kitchen next, or trying to figure out where the bathroom was. Some of these guys probably knew this woman very well, and they were afraid that she'd shown up that evening to start naming names. And really, fair question, why did she come? Well, the story says it's because she heard that Jesus was going to be there. And we can only guess what that might have meant. I mean, maybe she'd heard Jesus teaching out in public. Jesus tended to draw crowds that weren't welcome in church. Maybe when she saw Jesus, when she looked into his eyes, she saw something that she'd never seen in a man's eyes before. And whatever it was, it haunted her. It overwhelmed her. It captivated her to the point that she was compelled to come to the worst imaginable place, to take the wildest imaginable risk just for the chance to get near him again. And you notice in this whole story, this woman never says a word. I mean, I have to believe that she came with something to say or a request in mind for Jesus, or maybe even a little speech prepared. But when she sees Jesus, she can't say anything. She's just undone. In this room full of men staring daggers at her, she can only see Jesus, and he takes her breath away, and she can't form a sentence. But in her inability to speak, her actions speak louder than words. So standing there at his feet, she starts to weep. She's apparently so overcome with emotion, the tears are actually falling off her face. And as they fall, that's when she notices she's making tear tracks on Jesus' filthy feet. And again, she's overcome. This beautiful man, how could they insult him like this? And here she is making it worse, turning the dirt on his feet into mud. She looks around, there's no basin, there's no towel. She falls to her knees and, probably not thinking clearly in this impulsive act of love, she does the unspeakable. She lets down her hair. Now, when the Bible says that she lets down her hair, it doesn't just mean that it was up in a bun. Yes, her hair was bound, but it was also covered. For the Jews in that time, to let down your hair was an act of intimacy akin to getting undressed. Actually, if a married woman let down her hair in front of a man who was not her husband, it was grounds for divorce. But she lets down her hair. Something she'd done for so many men. Perhaps she'd done it so often that she didn't think anything of it, but the men in the room would have gasped. She's just desperate to right this wrong. This beautiful man has been horribly slighted, and her tears have made it worse, and she's just got to fix it. And before she knows it, she's on her hands and knees, washing his feet with her tears and her hair. And then this perfume. Did she intentionally bring it as a gift? Could be. I mean, it was extremely valuable. This wasn't a time when you could run down to Walmart and spend $10 to pick up a bottle of cheap perfume. At this time, perfumes were the work of skilled craftsmen, and they're difficult to make, incredibly expensive. So maybe she brought it as a gift, as an offering to lay before this man. But I wonder, maybe it wasn't a gift. Maybe she just had it on her. Maybe it's something that she kept on her person, maybe in a little jar that she kept on a necklace, and she kept it close at hand because she used it for work. She used it to make herself more alluring to men. Or, as the night wore on, she would use it to cover the smell of the last man before the next one came in. And if that's the case, I think there's profound meaning in the fact that she just took it, this symbol of the life that she lived, this statement of her identity, and she just emptied it all on Jesus. And when she was done, it was gone. There was nothing left of who she used to be, no symbol left of her past, no scent left whatsoever of who she used to be, because she had encountered Jesus and he had changed absolutely everything for her. Now, we don't know what this woman had intended to say to Jesus with her words, but I can't imagine how she could have said it any better than she did with her actions. And clearly Jesus knew what she wanted, what she needed, and he does not hesitate to give it to her. He says, "Your sins are forgiven." And that was it. Jesus didn't work out terms and conditions. There wasn't a repayment plan. There were no penalties exacted. He just sees the entirety of this woman's life in an instant, and with a few compassionate words, he wipes the slate entirely clean. And of course, it's not the first time or the last time that Jesus does this. If you were with us a couple of weeks ago, you heard the story of Jesus spontaneously forgiving the sins of a paralyzed man. And just like on this occasion, the religious leaders were horrified because there's only one person who has the right and the ability to categorically forgive sins, and that's God. And as Jesus sets this woman beautifully and completely free from absolutely everything, I'm sure Jesus can hear the church leaders around him correcting him, letting him know he can't do what in fact he just did, and he doesn't care. He doesn't address them. But there's one person in the room who doesn't question, who knows that Jesus has all the power and authority to forgive. She doesn't question it because they're on her knees with her hair down publicly in front of a bunch of outraged religious people. She knows beyond a shadow of a doubt that she has been given a brand new life. So now, as we look at this beautiful but ancient encounter story, what practical takeaway can we grab onto if we want to encounter Jesus today? Well, to figure that out, let's ask one important question. See, I feel like there's a meaningful detail that's missing from the story. And here it is. How did this woman even get in here? I mean, does the town prostitute, how does the town prostitute get through the door of a wealthy religious leader's house on the night when he's throwing a fancy dinner party, when all the religious elite are there? I mean, somebody had to have met this woman at the door, like one of the man's servants, maybe even a member of his own family, and there's no way they would have let in an uninvited guest, especially not her. And yet when we meet her in the story, she's standing right there in the middle of everyone. And to me, that leads to only one conclusion, and it's our big takeaway for how we can encounter Jesus today. I hate to say this, and I wish it wasn't so, but it's just true. If you want to encounter Jesus, chances are you're going to have to shove your way past a bunch of religious people. This woman had reason to fear the judgment and rejection of religious people above all other things. I mean, in the culture of this day, these religious leaders would have made sure to let everyone know how offensive and irredeemable this woman was. These religious leaders would have held this woman up as an example of all the ills of society. They would have campaigned against her and everyone like her. They would have made sure that everyone knew that God hated people like her. And yet, when this woman saw Jesus, whenever that was, she could see in his eyes the exact opposite of what she saw in the eyes of the Pharisees. And when she saw that, she knew that she had to encounter Jesus. Even though she discovered that the best place to find him on that particular day was right in the middle of these religious vipers, she was willing to endure it, to push past it, to elbow her way through the religious gatekeepers to get to Jesus. Now, I'm guessing there are a lot of you listening to this who don't have a life full of Jesus precisely because of people like the Pharisees, because of religious people. Met too many people who might wear a Jesus t-shirt, but they care way more about people's behavior than they care about their hearts or their physical needs. I mean, you've had run-ins with people on social media who you wish weren't part of your world, and they just love to post scriptures, but it's also very clear that they care way more about being right than about being loving. I mean, you've heard these loud people on TV and maybe even on street corners who are backed up by a church logo, but instead of being for Jesus and for people, they go on and on about all the things they're against. I mean, if you've experienced that, it sucks and it hurts and it's genuinely deeply wounding, and I won't dare downplay that. But this woman, even though her world looks different from ours, she experienced all those things. If anything, it was worse for her, and yet she refused to equate all of that garbage with Jesus. She blocked all that out. She pushed past every gatekeeper, every judgmental stare, every insult and accusation, and refused to let any of it keep her from encountering Jesus. And her reward was him. Life, forgiveness, freedom, literally everything. And you know, at the end of this message, I'm supposed to draw a conclusion for all of us about who this story says Jesus is. But really, in this case, there's just so many answers to that question. I'm just going to let you decide for yourself. Jesus is the enemy of religion. Jesus is a friend of sinners. Jesus is a lover of the broken and hurting. Jesus is worth the fight past religious people. Why don't you think about it? In fact, at this point, like we do every week, I'm going to turn things over to Kendall and Luke. And while they lead us, I want to invite you to try something. Close your eyes if you have to. And imagine all the religious people who have condemned you or hurt you or in any way stood between you and Jesus. If there's a big long line of them, if they make a huge crowd in front of you, that's just fine. Because behind them all, picture Jesus. You can see him through the crowd. Picture him looking at you. Picture his eyes. He's smiling. And no one in this crowd is capable of stopping you from pushing through and encountering him. You can do that right now.
Well, welcome.